In 2048, the pace of technological development was like a runaway horse, completely breaking free from the control boundaries of governments around the world. While the innovative achievements from laboratories were still racing down production lines, street crime data had simultaneously climbed to a dangerous peak, the crime rate increased significantly, and social order became worse and worse. It was like a piece of paper folded repeatedly, with deeper and deeper chaos hidden in the creases. Some ambitious people lying low in the shadows gathered violent criminal organizations, deliberately sowing chaos within the fabric of the city. Their faces were hidden behind masks woven by technology, their true identities became unsolvable riddles. Even their ultimate goal of stirring up trouble was like an underwater reef in the deep sea, no one could see its full picture. In order to mend this torn order, the Los Angeles Police Department equipped every law enforcement officer with a robotic police partner. These bodies forged from titanium alloy were as tough as shields, and the combat skills stored in their program databases were sufficient to handle the most complex confrontations. Logically, they should have been powerful tools for safeguarding peace, but in the eyes of Officer John, these cold steel creations without body temperature always had an impenetrable layer of coldness between them and humans. He didn't believe these beings that only followed code could truly understand the chaos and complexity of human society. The story dates back to an arrest operation 1 year ago. At that time, John and his comrades were carrying out a secret arrest mission together, but somehow the news leaked out, and they unexpectedly fell into an enemy ambush. Shortly after everyone got into the war zone, there were already serious casualties, and the officer who had always been John's partner was also calling John for backup on the walkie-talkie, but the direction where his partner was located was heavily guarded by enemy forces. John told the robotic police officer about the situation and asked it to cover him as he charged in, but they had only taken a few steps when they were ambushed. One of the robotic police officers was shot by the enemy. Its head fell to the ground, twitched twice, and then shut down. By this time, John had broken through the siege and reached his partner's side, but his partner was already on the verge of death. He could only comfort his partner while dealing with the nearby enemies, and at the same time figure out how to retreat with the injured person. His partner told John that the whole team he belonged to had been ambushed, and that there must be a traitor within their ranks. John called his robotic police officer over and asked it to help him and his partner, but after the robotic police officer walked over to them, it only quickly scanned the partner's injury. It determined that the partner's injury was beyond saving, and that it now needed to go help others. After saying that, the robotic police officer left without looking back. It was from this moment that John realized that, although these robotic police officers had a human-like appearance, they were actually just strings of cold code. Unwilling to abandon his partner, he had to cover the retreat alone. But before they could get far, the enemy attacked them again. John fell to the ground from the powerful shockwave. When he looked up at his partner, he found that his partner had already stopped breathing, and John also lost his right leg. Immediately after, the enemy threw another pulse bomb over. In the massive explosion, John fell into a complete coma. This operation caused John to be in a coma for a whole year, and when he woke up, he found that he had lost all memories of the day of the operation. After receiving regular rehabilitation treatment at the hospital, John, who had returned home, received a notice of reinstatement from the police chief. The police chief said that during the time John was in a coma, she had already found out some information about the rebel organization, and this rebel organization was presumably the same group that attacked John. To find out the truth, John didn't overthink and immediately accepted the reinstatement notice, lifting the restrictions on his mechanical prosthetic leg. Early the next morning, he went to the police chief's office to report for duty. The police chief told John that recently they had found weapons used by an organization, which were the same type of pulse bombs that had attacked John back then. So this group was highly likely the ones who had harmed John. Their target was a biological laboratory. The police had currently arrested one of their members, but hadn't yet gotten any useful information out of him. That was why the police chief was in a hurry to recall John, hoping to see if he could remember anything. The main project of this biological laboratory was programmable DNA. The purpose of this group snatching the research drugs and experimental samples was definitely not that simple. After explaining the basic situation, the police station assigned another robotic police officer to John, but this robotic police officer's program seemed to make it a chatterbox, talking non-stop along the way, and John's way of dealing with the noisy robotic officer was simple and rough, that is, opening the car door and pushing the robotic police officer out. After all, the robot wouldn't die. If it broke, they could just fix it. But due to John's impulsive action, the logistics department no longer had any extra robotic police officers left, so they matched John with another type of robot. This type of robot was different from the ones currently in widespread use. Its emotional program was closer to that of humans, and its functions were more comprehensive. but due to some uncontrollable factors, this type of robot had long been discontinued. John thought all these robots were more or less the same, so he immediately activated the robotic police officer David. The restarted David immediately identified John at the first opportunity. On the other side, a police officer was buying coffee. Unexpectedly, a group of masked men suddenly rushed over and immediately destroyed the robotic police officer, and also tied up the police officer. This incident quickly made it to the news. John guessed that these masked men were in the same group as the ones who attacked him, so he brought in the terrorist, who had already been arrested by the police station, to ask what their purpose was in kidnapping the police officer. When the other person refused to answer, John immediately resorted to force. David also silently drew the curtains of the interrogation room. But David noticed a problem, that is, the gunshot wound on the terrorist's leg seemed to have been inflicted by himself. He had deliberately let the police arrest him. Seeing that David had seen through him, the terrorist had to reveal the organization's stronghold. John immediately led his team to the stronghold, but while he was driving to the stronghold, the terrorist, under the pretense of going to the bathroom, took out a small component from his mouth. After pressing the activation button, he hid the component in the bathroom. After arriving at the stronghold, John and his team found a device resembling a bomb in the corridor. For a moment, no one dared to make a move. It was David who stepped forward to inspect it, and found that the device wasn't a bomb, but it was definitely a triggerable trap. They still needed to be more cautious. They followed the rope of the mysterious device to its source, and found the kidnapped police officer. The officer was being held inside a sealed bulletproof glass cover. This sight made John immediately sense that something was wrong. He immediately called his colleague to ask where the terrorist was now. The colleague said they were currently transporting the terrorist. John told them to turn around immediately, saying this might be a trap that had been planned long in advance. Just then, the terrorist, who had somehow broken free from his restraints, attacked the police officers in the car, and the trap was activated remotely. A thick cloud of smoke sprayed out from the sealed glass cover. Then the trapped police officer was corroded in the thick smoke, watching his colleague die a tragic death right in front of him. John fell into a breakdown. David collected the blood of the deceased officer and uploaded it to the headquarters, asking the technical department to analyze the source of the smoke. What they didn't know was that the rebel organization had already installed a similar mysterious device on the roof of the police station. The same gas was transmitted into the pipes through this device. The button that had been hidden in the bathroom just now was also activated in an instant. The whole building was plunged into paralysis in a moment. Robotic police officers fell one after another. Once the gas transmission was completed, the other human police officers would also be instantly corroded by the gas, just like the kidnapped officer earlier. Having just seen his colleague's death, John rushed back to the police station immediately. Since David wasn't from the same production batch as the other robotic police officers, he wasn't affected by the circuit paralysis. He detected that the terrorists were on the rooftop. John immediately led his team and charged up there. The rebel organization didn't expect their plan to be exposed so quickly, so they immediately grabbed a can of gas and ran downstairs and sprayed the gas at the faces of any police officers they saw. But they mistakenly took David for a human too, and this gas had no effect on him. In the chaos, John knocked down a terrorist and seized a bottle of gas from him. Inside a hotel, a man was extracting DNA from the red-haired woman in front of him. But just after he obtained the data, two men broke into the room and shot him immediately. The man was killed on the spot. While the red-haired woman left with the two men, the police station received a report about the incident soon after. John and David rushed to the crime scene immediately, but no clues were left at the scene, because the murderers had used a DNA bomb before leaving, which could erase all DNA in the room. And in the surveillance footage, the two men wore glow masks, making it impossible to identify their faces at all. But the face of the red-haired woman was clearly visible. David judged from the red-haired woman's pupils that she was a robot. The police station also found new clues. The victim in this case was named Jones, and he was an emotional robot manufacturer. He had no spouse or children. He had spent his whole life researching emotional robots. This type of robot could provide humans with both emotional and physical companionship, so their program settings were relatively gentler and more capable of empathizing with human emotions. The invention of emotional robots even led to a significant drop in the crime rate of sexual transactions. But just 3 months ago, Jones' robot company went bankrupt. The creditors took all his property and stored it in an abandoned warehouse. John and David went to the warehouse to investigate, where they saw many robots that hadn't yet been activated. At the same time, the police station received new clues again. They extracted the red-haired robot's DNA from the elevator of the hotel where the crime occurred. But strangely enough, the DNA on the red-haired robot came from a young woman named Nicole, and Nicole had been kidnapped in a parking lot 3 weeks ago. Her whereabouts are still unknown, and more coincidentally, 3 similar cases have already occurred. The most recent one happened just these 2 days. A young mother with a child was kidnapped when she got out of the car to throw away garbage. but the kidnappers didn't notice the child in the car when they abducted the mother, so the child might have seen something, but the child was too young and was frightened, so it would probably be difficult to get any useful information out of them. So John took out a giraffe toy and used a little bit of technology to make the mini giraffe move. Under the comfort of the toy, the child told John that he had seen two men take his mother away. They were driving a silver car. The police immediately launched an investigation to track down silver vehicles, while John and David continued to search for the whereabouts of the red-haired robot. They soon found a man named Loren. He had once sued Jones for infringing his intellectual property rights, and now that Jones was dead, the intellectual property rights had been transferred to Loren. It was also not long ago that Loren established his own emotional robot company. John managed to get Loren to admit that his clients were from an Albanian consortium, but Loren didn't dare to reveal anything else, so John asked David to hack into Loren's client network and tracked down a mysterious factory. They found the discarded red-haired robot there. The red-haired robot, having been used up, had been turned into a rubber figure. Based on the red-haired robot's physical structure, researcher Rudy judged that the people from this company were most likely using human skin to enhance the robot's realistic appearance. But to find out more of the truth, he needed a new robot, because the current red-haired robot was too badly damaged. Just as they were worrying about this, their colleague Mary called. She told John that the police station had tracked down the silver car again. This was an opportunity that wouldn't come again. John immediately led his team to chase after it, and successfully intercepted the silver car, and found a curly-haired robot inside the car. And on the curly-haired robot, they once again detected DNA belonging to a missing woman. John and David took the curly-haired robot to the laboratory, and learned from her about the red-haired robot being skinned and destroyed. Although the curly-haired robot was a machine, her program settings allowed her to have more gentle emotions. Seeing her former companion turned into this state by their boss, the curly-haired robot immediately chose to turn against them, and revealed the base where the manager conducted skin experiments. But by the time John arrived, the manager had already fled with the experimenters. But this trip wasn't completely fruitless. In the empty laboratory, David found a type of module needed for robot production. This module had long been eliminated by the research team due to its weak functionality, but it was widely used in the civilian sector. This module had a special function, that is, it recorded the GPS location of its initial activation. They could make use of this feature right now. David told Rudy about this discovery. Rudy immediately found the curly-haired robot, and checked her activation information, and used this information to lock onto Kingston Heights. John led the police officers to this location. Many women were tied to experimental beds, with tubes inserted all over their skin. This place was indeed the experimental base. Some of the women had already died, due to having their skin removed, but John and his team still managed to rescue some people. Luckily, the child's mother was still alive, after contributing all her value. The destruction order for the curly-haired robot was also issued. Because they carried human DNA, they weren't allowed to circulate on the market. Being destroyed was her only fate. David came to visit the curly-haired robot before she was destroyed. Watching his companion being sent into the destruction machine, his heart felt complicated. Perhaps one day, after his own value was fully utilized, he would also be unable to escape the fate of being destroyed. And before one crisis was resolved, another arose. On this day, John and David were on their regular patrol, when they suddenly received a call from the police station. A homicide had just occurred 3 blocks away from them, and they needed to rush to the scene immediately. It turned out that just a few minutes earlier, terrorists had invaded a technology building, shot the receptionist, and kidnapped everyone inside the building. They had also planted a bomb in the server room. After John and David arrived at the scene, David checked the surveillance footage immediately, and found that the criminals were still on the 25th floor, and hadn't left. So he and John walked up along the emergency exit, but they had only taken a few steps, when a violent explosion sounded. A huge hole had been blown in the building's floor. John immediately reported the situation to the headquarters. The police station quickly began evacuating the crowd in the neighborhood, and deployed police teams and snipers to take their positions. The police chief told John to evacuate first. After all, the situation inside the building was still unclear, but John chose to ignore the police chief's order. Due to the explosion just now, all distress signals near the building couldn't be sent out, so they were all transmitted to David's server. David answered a distress call. The caller was named Paige, an employee of the building. When the terrorist attack happened, she had hidden in the utility room on the 25th floor, and hadn't been discovered by the robbers for the time being. John learned some information about the robbers from Paige. Then he comforted Paige, saying that the police would definitely rescue everyone as soon as possible. But as soon as he finished speaking, the robbers shot a hostage, and threw the hostage out of the window. There was a note on the back of the hostage's body that said, "Police, get out." Faced with this blatant threat, the police station had to send a drone to negotiate with the robbers, and through the drone's data scanning technology, they learned that the leader of the kidnappers was named Lucas. Lucas demanded that the police withdraw all police officers and snipers, and arranged 3 helicopters and a fission trigger for them. A fission trigger was a large-scale explosive device, capable of triggering a megaton-level explosion, and it was military technology that the police station had no right to use. But Lucas didn't care about that at all. If the police station didn't provide what he wanted within the specified time, then everyone here would die, and the number of casualties would be enough to end the police chief's career. Faced with such difficult conditions, Rudy said he could forge a fission trigger, as long as Lucas didn't activate it immediately after receiving it, it would buy them more time. Mary also found more information about Lucas. The gang led by Lucas wasn't committing a crime. For the first time, this group had a clear anti-Western stance. In August last year, an embassy near Tokyo also met with a case, with the same modus operandi. The consequences of opposing Lucas were all tragic. They didn't mind killing many people, even their own accomplices, but as long as their demands were met, they would definitely keep their promise and release the hostages. Helplessly, the police chief had to order everyone to evacuate. First, meanwhile, John and David, who had lost signal with the outside world, were attacked when passing the 15th floor, but the ricochet bullet used by the attacker hit David, and instead harmed the attacker himself. David scanned the attacker's facial information and found that he was a member of the Holy Expeditionary Army, but soon discovered that the attacker had used face-swapping technology, and the attacker's real identity was a robber, with multiple armed robbery convictions. There were also at least 7 face-swapping devices in this building. John couldn't figure out why he would disguise himself as a radical. If he just wanted to hide his face, using a glow mask would work just as well. But this was clearly not the best time to think about this question. Although David wasn't killed by the bullet, the hit to his head caused a problem with his regulator, and he would be unable to move in another 5 minutes. In desperation, John had to perform an emergency repair on David, using a nail clipper and chewing gum. At the same time, Paige sent new information again. She told John that the robbers were always looking at something from the window. There was also a gunman who got injured, and they seemed to have heard the gunshots from the 15th floor, so they were now planning to check the corridor. Paige was now planning to blend into the crowd of hostages too, because her younger sister was frightened and kept crying. She was worried that this would anger the robbers. If she could stay with her sister, at least her sister would feel more at ease. Paige told John that she would find a way to leave her phone in the room, so that John could hear what was happening inside. From the call, John heard that there was more than one group of robbers, and also heard that they had already obtained the fake trigger, but had no intention of taking the trigger with them. Then what were they going to such great lengths for? When it came to Paige mentioning that the robbers were always lingering by the window, John immediately asked David to scan the building across the street, and they found that there was a precious metal weighing station nearby. It turned out that this was a precious metal heist. This way, the reason why the robbers faked their identities made sense. At the same time, the sound of the robbers planting bombs came through the phone again. It turned out that they had no intention of letting the hostages leave alive at all. Moreover, the corridor was no longer passable now. They had to find another way out. In this situation where their whereabouts were at risk of being exposed, and they were outnumbered, David decided to sacrifice himself. He climbed up all the way through the elevator shaft, and successfully launched a surprise attack on the robbers, through the ventilation duct. Naturally, John couldn't be a deserter either. He copied the face-swapping technology used in the earlier fight, and used the data from it to disguise himself as an enemy ally, catching the opponents off guard. Then he immediately informed the headquarters of the robbers' real plan. The hostages were successfully rescued, and the police station also resolved the crisis. And through their repeated battles side by side, the friendship between David and John grew deeper and deeper. On this day, the police station received another case. Police from another district found a carload of drugs and a dead police officer, and initially determined that this was a gangland turf war. The deceased, named Cooper, was an old friend of John's. Even though they hadn't seen each other for many years, John didn't believe Cooper was a corrupt cop. Not to mention that a subcutaneous bug was found dug out from Cooper's body. If it were a gangland turf war, why would he carry a bug? The battalion commander learned from Cooper's direct supervisor that Cooper had been investigating a drug lord. Unluckily, the investigation was too long-term, and required a large amount of funding support, so this sting operation wasn't approved by the police department. Cooper had been conducting the investigation privately. Although it was now found that Cooper was deceased, and his father's bank account had recently had frequent large transfers, his supervisor still believed that Cooper was innocent, and hoped that the police chief would keep him updated on the progress of the investigation at any time. John learned from Cooper's wife that, before Cooper's death, he had been repairing the fireplace in a small cabin in the The woods, which was a cabin left to him by his father, and he rarely went there on usual days. In John's memory, Cooper wasn't good at repairing things, so he figured there must be another secret in the cabin. Sure enough, when John and David arrived at the cabin, the place was in a mess. It had already been searched in advance, but these people hadn't found the recorder Cooper had hidden in the fireplace. All the content recorded by the subcutaneous bug on the day he carried out the undercover plan had been transmitted to this recorder. From the recording, it could be inferred that Cooper had probably found the drug lord, and the drug lord seemed to be looking for a new drug manufacturer. So John contacted a drug dealer and asked the dealer to act as an intermediary to lure the drug lord out, telling the drug lord that they had a drug manufacturer on their side, and this drug manufacturer would be played by Rudy, who was proficient in various experiments. They agreed to meet at an abandoned dock. Before going undercover, Rudy took a liquid GPS so that John and his team could track his signal. Rudy had no undercover experience, so David accompanied him inside as a precaution. After demonstrating his drug-making skills, Rudy passed the first stage assessment. A man named Gavin came forward and told Rudy to follow him alone to the real laboratory. Meanwhile, the headquarters quickly scanned Gavin's information and found that this man had once escaped a major drug trafficking charge. Could he be the drug lord? But to everyone's surprise, Rudy's GPS signal disappeared, because Gavin had given him a GPS dissolving potion. This was very strange. This type of liquid had just been developed internally by the police station. How could it be circulating on the market, unless there was a mole within the police station? They pulled up Gavin's file again and checked it carefully, only to find that the person who had signed Gavin's release order back then was exactly Cooper's direct supervisor. On the other side, Rudy met the drug lord in the Real laboratory, and to his surprise, the drug lord was actually the supervisor. At the same time, the police chief called the supervisor and pretended to report on the investigation progress, but in fact, he was locating the supervisor's phone. The drug lord was successfully arrested. Rudy also completed his first undercover mission without any serious danger. During the trial of a major murder case, as soon as the holographic projection of witness Haley appeared in the courtroom, someone broke into her room and brutally killed her, and the other witness, a psychic, fled the crime scene immediately after hearing the commotion. When David and John found the psychic, they learned from her that she had communicated with Haley through psychokinesis, and told the police that the murderer was Ethan. But Ethan was the suspect in that major murder case, and he was currently being held in another prison. He was even in the courtroom when Haley was killed. How could he have committed the crime in two places at once? To figure out what was going on, Mary went to Ethan's house to investigate, only to find that Ethan had actually cloned many versions of himself. These clones were specifically responsible for removing obstacles for him. Before Mary could report to the police station, two clones appeared and tied her up, and threatened the police station to release Ethan's original body, using Mary's life as leverage. A dangerous person like Ethan could naturally not be released, but the police also couldn't ignore Mary's life or death, especially when John learned that Mary was in trouble. He appeared very anxious, so the police came up with the idea of using holographic projection technology, creating an illusion by projecting both the original body and the clones. Unexpectedly, this trick actually worked. The police not only successfully rescued Mary, but also dealt a heavy blow to Ethan. Mary and John's relationship also grew closer because of this incident. One morning, a man held a doctor at gunpoint and said he was about to be killed and needed immediate medical treatment, but he stopped breathing before he could finish explaining the reason. After investigation, John found that the man's death was related to an artificial heart, and this type of heart was sourced from deceased people who had already been cremated. It had also been modified to allow control over the heart's effective lifespan. In other words, someone was secretly controlling the lifespan of the transplant recipients. John first went to the organ sales institution. The staff said that they did sell artificial organs, but after the user died, these organs would all be destroyed, and they were only responsible for transplantation, not destruction. Perhaps they should investigate the funeral home responsible for cremation. John and David immediately rushed to the funeral home that collaborated with the institution. With just a few words, they got the cremator Henry to admit that he was reselling artificial hearts. Up to now, Henry had resold more than 100 hearts, but he didn't know who these hearts were being sold to. His supplier only purchased the hearts from him and wouldn't disclose their own customer sources. It seemed there was someone else who modified the hearts. At the same time, Rudy discovered that there was a small component in this type of heart that could modify the heart's operating duration. In other words, if the user didn't renew the fee on time, they could die at any moment. This was an obvious case of extortion. John and Henry joined forces to set a trap, lured the pickup person over, then followed the pickup person to take down the underground heart transplantation site, and arrested both the pickup person and the doctor who performed the surgeries. During the interrogation of the pickup person, the latter claimed that he was really just a delivery person. He would deliver anything as long as he was paid, and knew nothing else about the matter. As for the doctor, he was even more kept in the dark. he had no idea at all that he had been transplanting modified hearts. He had always thought the hearts were modified to facilitate remote diagnosis, and the arrest of the doctor and the delivery person also caused the real mastermind behind the scenes to prepare to lay low and disappear. Recipients of the artificial hearts began to die one after another. While investigating the bodies of the recipients, Mary found that almost all of them had applied for organ transplant assistance programs, but their applications had been rejected by the institution because they had no insurance. Therefore, the mastermind of this case was most likely someone who had obtained the rejection list and used it to identify buyers for the second-hand hearts. They found the administrator of the project institution. While investigating the administrator, they noticed that his assistant was acting suspiciously, and after the doctor looked at the assistant's photo, he also confirmed that this was the person who had asked him to perform the surgeries. Later, they went to the assistant's home, and David identified decomposed blood on the floor. The heart transplant operations had been going on for more than just a day or two. There must have been cases where recipients failed to pay on time. Such a profitable resource couldn't be wasted, so they must have often killed recipients to retrieve the hearts. Strangely enough, none of the recent corpses had been found without a heart, and wasn't the funeral home the first place to come into contact with the hearts. After going around in circles, they went back to the funeral home again and found Henry, who was preparing to flee. It turned out that Henry and the assistant from the project institution were accomplices in the artificial heart modification incident. The unprepared Henry was arrested by John and David, and the artificial heart case finally came to an end. Recently, a perverted serial killer had appeared in the city. He would attach a bomb to the victim's neck, and then livestream the horrifying scene of the victim being blown to death to the public. The first victim was a bank employee. When John and David arrived, it was already too late to defuse the bomb, so they could only install a protective shield, and then watch the victim die right in front of them. The livestream of the bank employee's death attracted the attention of thousands of people on the dark web, and many even hoped the killer would do it again. John and David found a drug that could knock people unconscious in the victim's car. They initially deduced that the killer must have knocked the victim unconscious before attaching the bomb. Moreover, after his livestream gained widespread attention, the killer immediately began planning a second livestream. This time, he kidnapped a female flower shop clerk and issued a warning, saying that only John and David were allowed to investigate the case. In the face of such evil forces, John and David were naturally determined to fight to the end. The second livestream started soon after. The girl walked timidly in the park, holding a bouquet of flowers in her hands, and along the way, she didn't forget to remind the children to stay away from her. John and David quickly found the girl in the pavilion. Under Rudy's remote guidance, David tried to defuse the bomb. While the bomb was being defused, the girl told John that she knew who the killer was. His name was Simon, and they were online friends. Once, they met in person, and Simon gave her a bouquet of flowers, but she had left the flowers on a bench, so today, Simon made her hold flowers again, as if forcing her to continue their date. The viewers in the livestream couldn't help but mock Simon, saying he didn't even know how to go on a date. Simon's expression also became a little flustered. At the last second before the countdown ended, David and John worked together to defuse the bomb. The police's success made the people in the livestream room feel very disappointed. Watching the number of viewers in the livestream drop rapidly, Simon was on the verge of collapse. The police also conducted an investigation into the two victims, and found that both of them had rejected Simon, in one way or another. After meeting Simon, the flower shop girl warned other girls on social media to be cautious about in-person meetings with online contacts. The bank employee had rejected Simon's loan application due to insufficient qualifications. Simon had attended the police academy before, but was dismissed by his sergeant due to mental issues, so the police first took the sergeant into protective custody, and began to investigate others who had argued with Simon, but none of them expected that Simon would use face-swapping technology to lure John, who was on a mission, into a corner. It turned out that John was his next target. When John woke up from his coma, he found a bomb had been strapped to his neck. Worse still, he was tied to a bench in the square. The phone in his pocket rang. It was Simon calling. He told John 3 detonation conditions. First, if John tells the people in the square that there's a bomb here. Second, if the police try to assist John. Third, if the police attempt to evacuate the surrounding area. If any of the above 3 conditions is triggered, Simon will detonate the bomb immediately. In other words, John could only rely on himself this time, and there were only 10 minutes left on the bomb's countdown. Simon left John with simple bomb defusing tools, and kept provoking him, but John remained calm from start to finish. His calm demeanor only made Simon even angrier. The police soon arrived nearby. David scanned the surrounding area and determined that Simon was hiding in the bell tower not far away, because Simon was holding the detonator. The snipers didn't dare to act rashly. As the countdown grew shorter and shorter, David decided to climb the bell tower to seize the detonator, but unluckily, David's power was also running low. He climbed toward the bell tower at the fastest speed possible. John tried his best to stay calm and continued defusing the bomb. Finally, at the last moment before David's power ran out, he successfully climbed the bell tower, stunned Simon with an electric shock, and turned off the bomb control. The next day during the day, John and David received another new case. A programmer was shot and killed on the spot. There were 3 bullet marks at the scene. Strangely enough, only 1 bullet fragment was found. The new model robotic police officer guessed that the bullet had ricocheted at the crime scene before finally hitting the victim, but David didn't agree. He thought the fragment needed to be taken back for testing. The new robotic officer retorted that David was an obsolete model, and his opinion wasn't worth accepting, only to be shot in the head by John. This action made David feel very warm. He realized that John had already regarded him as a friend, which was why John couldn't tolerate others speaking poorly of him. David quickly tracked down the programmer's wife, Kayla. Kayla said that her husband had attracted significant attention in the industry for developing intelligent tracking technology after testing the program. Designed by the programmer, David deduced that the tracking technology developed by the programmer himself might have been the cause of his death. At the same time, Rudy also sent news that the bullet fragment belonged to a type of tracking bullet, a weapon used in the military, but it had been stolen 3 months ago, and was now circulating on the black market. After returning to the police station, John asked Mary to investigate the programmer's transaction records, to find the buyer who had purchased the program, while he and David continued to question Kayla to see if they could find any clues. But during this questioning session, David noticed that all the surrounding cameras seemed to be focused on Kayla, which was exactly one part of the tracking technology. Sure enough, the next second a tracking bullet rushed straight toward Kayla. Luckily, David reacted in time and blocked the bullet. It turned out that not long ago, this batch of bullets had a new buyer. To demonstrate the bullet's effectiveness, the seller targeted Kayla and planned to kill her as well. John immediately transferred Kayla to a signal-free safe house, planning to use Kayla as bait later to lure out the seller. Meanwhile, Mary found a video of the programmer being threatened by the seller inside the programmer's bank safe. It turned out that the seller had threatened the programmer with Kayla's life, forcing him to sell the tracking technology to them for use. The police chief also found an advertisement for the tracking bullets on the dark web. Unwilling to wait for her fate, Kayla walked out of the safe house without consulting the police, preparing to attract the seller. Luckily, John found her before the seller appeared and told her the truth about the programmers selling the technology. At this point, the people tracking Kayla also arrived, but they didn't expect there to be police here. In the end, John and his team shot and killed one seller, and arrested another for further interrogation. After going through so many cases and dangers, the criminal organization that had caused John to lose one leg finally sent news again. A few hours ago, the police captured an out-of-control robot, and shot it dead on the spot. After confirming the robot was dead, this strange robot was placed in the evidence room, but as soon as the police left, the robot came back to life. It turned out that it wasn't actually out of control. Instead, it had deliberately created the incident to sneak into the police station's evidence room and obtain a robot head. This was precisely the reason why that group of terrorists attacked the police station in the first place. This robot head was what they had been trying to get. This head belonged to an XRN series robot. This type of robot was very brutal, and was a combat tool used in the military field. The robot replaced its head with the XRN head, and left the police station without anyone noticing, and then went to the warehouse where the emotional robots were previously stored to replace its body with a brand new one. When the police chased to the warehouse, they only saw an abandoned robot body and an injured old man. The old man, named Mike, was a robot invention expert. All the robots currently circulating on the market were given souls by him. The same model of robot as David was also invented by Mike. It's a pity that Mike's career was ruined back then, due to the XRN's out-of-control incident. David's model was also phased out, and the company was also deeply in debt. After learning that the XRN was causing trouble again, Mike decided to assist the police in finding the XRN, and completely destroying it. On the other side, the XRN had already broken into a laboratory, and taken a large number of robot chips. Then it went to a bar. This bar was holding a celebration for the councilor election, and all the attendees were high-ranking members of society, and the XRN went inside and launched an indiscriminate massacre. Although John arrived at the scene with a group of robotic police officers, ordinary robotic police officers were no match for XRN at all. Luckily, John had obtained a pulse gun from Mike to stop XRN's movements. John seized the opportunity, pounced on XRN when it wasn't looking, and inserted the pulse gun into the back of XRN's neck. But to his surprise, the pulse gun had no effect at all. Luckily, David appeared in time and held XRN back. John, regaining his composure, pulled out the grenade from XRN's body and completely blew XRN up. At this point, the police station called to tell them that Mike had fled. It was the counselor who had pushed for the phasing out of David's model of robot. It was the counselor who had ruined Mike's career. It turned out that XRN's actions had been under his control all along. Mike had infiltrated the police station to obtain the soul chip and build his own robot army, but he definitely needed a safe laboratory now. David believed that the safest place was the area outside the city's isolation wall, but many unknown dangers lurked there. The police chief thought Mike wouldn't risk his life, but at this point, Mike was already standing outside the isolation wall. The day after dealing with XRN, John was assigned to investigate a case involving the death of modified children. 2 genetically modified children died at the same time. Preliminary investigation showed that they died from a mysterious drug. Coincidentally, a recently drowned ordinary human died in a very similar way to the 2 modified children. So John deduced that this might not be just a simple drug accident. They first found the drowned person's family, and learned from his mother that he was a good swimmer, so his death must have been an accident, and it was highly likely that he had taken an excessive amount of drugs under someone else's instigation. To find out the truth, his mother had even hired a private detective, but all of the drowned person's classmates denied being friends with him. And this included the 2 recently deceased modified children. John said he wanted to listen to the private detective's investigation recordings, but the mother said she had already handed them over to the police, but David found no records of them. Could it be that someone had deliberately deleted them? After visiting the school the deceased had attended, they found the mysterious drug in the deceased's dormitory, and through data monitoring of the drug, found the location where the drug was developed. To their surprise, it turned out to be Charlie, a classmate of the deceased. Charlie admitted that this was indeed a banned drug, but he had invented this drug to improve the physical condition of modified humans, as long as it was taken in the right dosage. But recently, he discovered that someone had hacked into the drug printing program and tampered with the drug dosage. At the same time, Mary found the chat records between the deceased and her father before her death. Their father seemed to be hiding something for his daughter. To find out the truth, John and David visited the deceased's father and learned that it was this man who had gotten rid of the private detective hired by the drowned person's mother. The reason was that his daughter had taken the drug together with the drowned person, and the drowned person's mother had sent a detective to investigate. He was afraid that this matter would involve his daughter, so he got rid of the detective, but at the same time, Charlie provided a video, which was the last video of the drowned person before her death. It turned out that Charlie and the drowned person were very close friends, but the drowned person was a natural human, studying in an elite school, where most students were modified humans. Put her under great pressure. Her mother also placed all her hopes on her, which was why she chose to take the drug, but she found that even after taking the drug, she still couldn't live up to her mother's expectations. Unable to bear the pressure any longer, she chose to drown herself. But her mother believed that her daughter had been harmed by her classmates. When she asked the other 2 deceased girls about her daughter, the 2 girls seemed indifferent. The mother, overwhelmed by grief, hired a hacker to break into the drug manufacturing program and increase the drug dosage for the 2 modified girls, which finally led to the tragedy. What an absurd reason and a ridiculous tragedy. After the case was solved, to prevent similar incidents from happening again, stricter controls were imposed on this type of drug. The excessive development of technology had led to a frequent increase in various types of criminal cases, and corresponding security systems had also been introduced. But recently, the inventor of the intelligent home security system and his wife were brutally killed in their home, and 1 year ago, a teenager died unluckily due to a malfunction of the security system. The teenager's time of death exactly coincided with the current time of death of the inventor and his wife. Therefore, the police reasonably suspected that someone might be seeking revenge for the teenager, but his family didn't have the ability to do so. After inspecting the crime scene, David learned through a conversation with the smart butler that the smart butler had felt it was being remotely controlled at the time of the crime, but there was no way to know who exactly was controlling it. The police chief asked the butler if the inventor and his wife had any enemies, only to be told that since the teenager's death case, the inventor and his wife had received tens of thousands of death threats. But eliminating suspects from this list was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Luckily, through the computer provided by the teenager's mother, they discovered that the teenager had a close female friend, and this girl was exactly a hacker. What's more, her next revenge target was the company that invented the smart butler. Through Rudy's introduction, John and his team also found a skilled hacker to confront the girl, and tracked all the way to the area where the girl was located. When she saw the police arriving, the girl initially wanted to shoot herself, but David mentioned that the teenager's computer had always stored photos of the 2 of them together. The girl put down her gun, and tears streamed down her face. The day the teenager had the accident, he had been planning to come see her. If he hadn't been coming to meet her that day, maybe the teenager wouldn't have died. The girl certainly knew that taking revenge on the inventor and his wife wouldn't bring the teenager back, but she still couldn't let go of the obsession in her heart. But this case also exposed the dangers of intelligent security systems. The next day, Mary asked John to investigate a heart disease death case. Although it sounded like a natural death, Mary believed it was a murder, because the deceased was a genetically modified human, and no one knew better than Mary, herself a modified human, about this. Modified humans usually don't get sick and have a longer lifespan. Even their appearance was far superior to that of ordinary humans. After investigating the deceased's body, David found an injection mark on the deceased's neck. Through DNA comparison, it turned out that there were DNA traces of 7 people on this injection mark, but all 7 of these people had already died of heart disease. Mary found out that the deceased had visited a club before his death. Only modified humans could enter this club, so Mary was in charge of retrieving the club's surveillance footage, while John and David conducted virtual autopsies on the other 7 bodies in Rudy's studio. Rudy found that the other 7 bodies also had needle marks on their backs, and deduced that the cases were committed by the same culprit. Furthermore, the culprit had implanted cosmetic robots into the brains of the victims, but this research had long been discontinued. John and David immediately went to the cosmetic hospital, and found the doctor who had once participated in this project. The doctor said that the reason the research was terminated back then was that they performed cosmetic procedures through gene extraction. For example, if John wanted David's high nose bridge, David would need to donate his genes to be transplanted into John. But the biggest drawback of this project was that the gene donors would develop arrhythmia, which would eventually lead to death. This was also the reason the project didn't continue. At the same time, the culprit was undergoing plastic surgery using the DNA he had collected. After a fit of convulsions, his pupils turned into a beautiful green color, and Mary also found a victim with green pupils. The culprit's recent crime frequency had increased, and the time left for the police was very urgent. John found his contact in the black market, and learned about a private clinic that offered plastic surgery services. When he and David arrived at the clinic, the doctor had already spotted their whereabouts through the surveillance camera, so the doctor injected himself with adrenaline, preparing to fight John hand-to-hand, but died due to an overdose. But John found information about the culprit and his next target on the doctor's computer. He informed Mary to protect the last potential victim, while his colleagues rushed to the culprit's home immediately. The culprit's motive for the crimes was very simple. He had fallen in love with a girl who lived in the building across the street, but they had only been in an online relationship and had never met in person. The culprit was afraid that the girl would dislike his appearance, so he resorted to plastic surgery technology. When he saw the clinic being raided by the police at night, he knew he didn't have much time left, so he summoned up the courage to meet his lover. But he never expected that after entering his lover's room, he would learn that she was actually blind in both eyes. She had only hidden this fact because she was afraid he would dislike her. Only then did the culprit realize how ridiculous everything he had done was. After saying a final goodbye to his lover, he jumped off the roof in front of John, ending his own life. After cooperating with John to handle multiple cases, David faced his first performance evaluation test since being reactivated. The result of this test would determine whether he could continue to serve as a police officer. David felt a little nervous about staying by John's side, but the case was more important right now. Just a few minutes ago, the police found a female corpse in an alley. The corpse had been stitched up, and all its internal organs had been removed and replaced with straw. A serial killer appeared 10 years ago, who used the exact same modus operandi. The killer, known as Scarecrow, was sentenced to life imprisonment and locked up in prison, and he had been arrested by John's father back then. It seemed that the current culprit intended to imitate the Scarecrow. Typically, people like this had communicated with the original criminal, so John and David went to the prison to question the Scarecrow, only to learn from the Scarecrow that he had never killed anyone at all. He had appealed 5 times back then, but the only person who believed him was John's father. Within 2 weeks after John's father said he would pursue the case to the end, he passed away, along with his evidence. Since the Scarecrow was a schizophrenic patient, no one would believe his words. After returning to the police station, John applied for permission to review his father's case files from back then as soon as possible, and found that his father had made notes on the feet of each victim, and had said that the Scarecrow was framed. John told David and Rudy about his discovery. Rudy had been examining the corpse just now, and combining the clues provided by John, he deduced that it was possible none of these victims were actually dead. What they were seeing now were just replicas, because all the victims had flat feet, and if you want to replicate a standing person, it's impossible to replicate the arch of the foot. Yet for the most recent victim, less than 3 weeks had passed since her disappearance to her death. It's impossible to clone a human being in 3 weeks, so the only possibility was that 3D printing technology was used, and it must have been an old-fashioned printer that couldn't print organs. It turned out that the straw wasn't part of the modus operandi, but rather used to cover up the truth about the replicas, because once someone is declared dead, no further search for their whereabouts is conducted. But if they are listed as missing, the search for them will continue indefinitely. The police immediately launched a blanket search, and finally found a suspicious van in the homeless district. Through facial recognition, they learned the driver was named Glenn, who had previously engaged in illegal parts trading on the black market. John and David had developed a strong rapport as partners. They quickly and lawfully arrested Glenn, only to find that although he was human, his body was covered with mechanical parts. It turned out that Glenn suffered from a degenerative disease, which was why he wanted to transform himself into a robot. He kidnapped these humans to conduct human experiments on them, aiming to better modify his own body. Everything was finally revealed. John solved the case that his father had failed to crack, and the Scarecrow, who had been wrongfully imprisoned for years, was finally exonerated. Most luckily, David passed his performance evaluation. The assessor said that John's praise had played an important role in this outcome. It turned out John had told the assessor that it was precisely because of David's presence that he could remain more determined as a police officer. Perhaps he had never imagined that he would one day accept a robotic police officer as his partner. And to thank John for treating him as a friend, David even gave him a latest model prosthetic leg. The American TV series Almost Human was released in 2013. It skillfully blends sci-fi and police drama elements, telling a story set in a futuristic world of Los Angeles in 2048. Although it was cancelled after only one season, Almost Human highlights the series' core conflict. Through its unique human-robot partner setting, a human detective who detests robots is forced to partner with a robot that is more human-like than humans, to solve cases together. Its imagination of future technology and exploration of the relationship between human nature and AI have left a deep impression on sci-fi fans. The series adopts a hybrid format of standalone episodes and serial storytelling. Each episode solves an independent case, while weaving in a main plotline about John investigating the truth behind the attack that happened to him in the past. This structure allows viewers to enjoy self-contained crime-solving stories, while also following the main characters as they uncover a larger conspiracy step by step. The setting of a future world offers abundant possibilities for the types of cases, ranging from biological crimes to high-tech theft, and from issues related to clones to ethical dilemmas of AI. Every case incorporates imagination about future technology. Almost Human may not be the most perfect sci-fi drama. Its case design sometimes seems hasty, and its technological imagination isn't the most groundbreaking either, yet it has successfully created an unforgettable pair of partners. Their interactions are both humorous and filled with warmth, featuring both the tension of action sequences and the spark of ideological clashes. In this sense, the series has achieved its core goal, exploring what almost human means, and why preserving the essence of humanity is so crucial in an era where technology increasingly permeates daily life. Finally, the value of Almost Human doesn't lie in how many dazzling displays of future technology it presents, but in that it reminds us that, no matter how advanced technology becomes, human emotions, memories, and relationships are the most important factors that define our existence.